This video includes my favorite drills for improving your wrist angles. We're going to talk today about one drill with the driver, one to improve your iron ball striking, and finally something for your short game. When it comes to improving both the directional control and the power potential of your driver, there's no better drill than the one I'm about to share with you. I've got a tour stick as well that I'm going to put down on the ground, and I'm going to angle this stick from the target line by about 15 to 20 degrees, and I'm placing it just near my trail foot. I'll explain what that's for shortly. When we take a look at the HackMotion data and we get to the top of the swing, this would be my standard backswing position where my lead wrist is already in a little bit of flexion. But for those of you who slice the ball and lose distance, you tend to find that that position at the top would result in something more typical with the numbers on the screen, a positive number, meaning an amount of extension here in this lead wrist. That's going to cause you to come down with the club face open, pointing up towards the sky, swing across the ball, and hit those weak slices to the right. So once you get to the top of your backswing, if you're looking to improve your driver, and you want to hit those long draws down the fairway, take this position at the top. I want you to increase the amount of flexion by bowing your wrist. Imagine you're twisting your wrist on a motorcycle throttle. You're rotating or twisting your wrist in that condition while you're holding the club. That's going to change that flex number at the top from being relatively neutral, for me, 3 or 4 degrees, to more like 24, 23, 24 degrees. That's a big, big difference in wrist flexion. And at the same time, while I'm doing that, I want to twist the wrist down, and I want to increase the ulnar deviation. So from this view here, I'm twisting, and I'm also adding the ulnar. If you remember ulnar deviation from the previous video, the ulnar deviation is this feeling of pointing the wrists more downwards. So top of the backswing for my standard would be 16 degrees of radial and relatively flat in terms of flexion extension, around 7 degrees. Now I'm going to increase the flexion, and as I do that, I'm going to take out some of the radial and move towards ulnar. What that helps me to do as I swing down, and now you'll see the relevance of this stick on the ground. When I reach this downswing checkpoint where the shaft is parallel to the ground, there's two things you want to ensure you have. Number one, the club head is behind your hands. It's angled slightly inwards. That's the reference of this orange stick on the ground. You don't want the shaft out in a straight line, and you certainly do not want to see the shaft out at this angle like so. That would be predetermining an out to in swing path. So up to the top, twist, come down. Number one checkpoint is the club head is slightly behind the hands. And number two checkpoint for the driver is that the club face is pointing slightly down towards the ground. Once again, not straight up and down, and certainly not up towards the sky. If you can encourage your wrists to work from the top of the backswing, twist down into this condition here, you're going to be setting yourself up for longer, straighter drives. That one felt pretty good. The expectation here would be that certainly if you suffer with slicing, excessive or twisting of the wrist closing the face should start to introduce some right to left curve to your golf ball. And for many of you, it might be the first time you've ever experienced that. So don't be afraid to take these feels to the extreme. That's the thing that I find a lot of players are reluctant to do. You're so set in your current pattern, and you think you just need a small, little, tiny adjustment to make everything right. Very often, you need a very giant leap away from where you currently are. Go to the top, twist that club down, club face behind you, twist the face down behind you and towards the ground. This is our checkpoint. Let's go ahead and hit one. And as I say, if you get that right, you should start to see that right to left curve being introduced into your driver. That was fairly effortless, 262 yards. You can see from the data that at address, my wrist was very much neutral, almost 0 degrees, 4 degrees of extension there, very, very slight. At the top, I kept it very neutral as well. But in impact, as I came down, I twisted and turned that wrist to 27 degrees of flexion. That's the part that's helping me to close the face to the path and introduce that more powerful smash factor, that increased ball speed, and that nice draw shape down the fairway. Give that a try and let me know how you get on. In my mind, there is no better drill for improved ball striking than this one. We're going to talk about the trail wrist in this drill and the trail wrist extension, which is the bending back, that needs to happen if you're going to compress those fairway shots as well as you want to. I'm going to start by just demonstrating what we have here in terms of the lead arm and the extension of the lead arm, this orange stick, and just slightly behind that we position the shaft. This is that shaft lean we set up with at setup. And if you take a look at the HackMotion data, there's about 16 degrees of extension in my trail wrist at that point. That would be, once again, fairly consistent with a neutral grip, a small amount of extension in that trail wrist to begin with. As I swing back, we're actually going to start to increase the amount of extension in that wrist. I have that nice relationship still between the stick and the shaft, and when I come back down, I've already added maybe 15, 16 degrees of extension there. I'm up to 32 degrees. And when I come back to the ball, I want to deliver more shaft lean than I started with. So I'm still at that 35 degrees of extension. Now, that won't necessarily be the exact amount that we get when we hit the ball. I just want to demonstrate to you, first of all, the concept of the shaft always trailing the lead arm. The orange stick is an extension of the lead arm, and the shaft is always trailing that lead arm. That's going to help us to hit down, get that shaft lean that we're looking for, and ultimately compress those iron shots as well as you ever have. So the drill you're going to do is to swing back to where the shaft is parallel to the ground. Make sure you're adding more trail wrist extension. There again, I'm up towards that 30 degree mark. If you want to go a little further back, you can. You'll see how that extension number stays very similar. So I'm really bending this wrist back as much as I can in the backswing. And then my feel coming down is that I'm going to retain that. I'm going to keep it the same. Now, the reality won't be that. The reality will be that extension is coming out, and ultimately this lead wrist, this trail wrist is moving towards flexion. It's straightening out the whole way. But what we want to make sure we do is delay that release to the point where at impact we still have sufficient extension in place. And in order to do that, this drill is called hit hard, stop quick. And the purpose of that is to have you swing down, make a pass at the ball, hit the ball, and stop the club head as quickly as you can after impact without the club head overtaking your wrist or certainly overtaking this lead arm. If we take a look at that practice swing that was measured there, I started with 16 degrees of trail wrist extension. I added it all the way up to 54, and when I hit the ground, the machine recognized I had 42 degrees of extension still in there. That is a lot of extension. That's a lot of shaft lean. That will massively improve the quality of the contact on your shots. Now, once you've been able to do that, and the great thing here is I could keep making practice swings, and as long as I hit the ground, the machine is going to get the sense that I'm making a pass at the ball and I'm hitting a ball. Again, there I've got lots and lots of extension at impact. Let's go ahead and hit one now. Once you've done that a few times, come down, hit hard, stop quick, and make sure the shaft doesn't go past your lead arm. Really nice contact, very small shot, 80 yards, just to start out with. This is an 8-iron. But again, I can show you the numbers there. I was able to go from 7 degrees of extension, almost 60 degrees at the top, and still have 30 degrees of extension in that trail wrist when I hit the ball. The goal here would be to build this drill up. Keep the numbers good, and keep increasing the speed while still trying to stop just after impact. Let's do one more. hard, stop quick. Again, nice contact. That one's gone a little bit further. Follow through felt a little bit longer on that one, but I was still able to maintain 32 degrees of trail wrist extension. And then as you build this out, you get the sense of how to delay that release. As you swing faster, you'll be able to still retain the quality of the strike, but actually be able to hit full length shots. And that was much closer to full speed in terms of my swing, my distance. The ball's going to go 150, 160 yards there. But you'll also notice that on that one, I did hit it a little bit to the left. And you'll see from the measurement there that although I started in extension, added all that nice extension in the backswing, by the time I hit that one, I'd actually lost more of my trail wrist extension than I started with. And as that comes out and that wrist starts to let the club overtake, that loss of trail wrist extension results in the club face closing down. You'll see there how I hit that one to the left. So as I get faster, it becomes harder to maintain the trail wrist extension, which is why this hit hard, stop quick exercise is an absolute game changer for golfers of every single level. Finally, let's talk a little bit about short game and the difference between chipping and pitching. Some people get this very confused and aren't sure how to approach the two different shots. I would say they're very different in terms of the desired outcome. A chip shot for me would be one that would be quite low to the ground and running quite a bit. And then a pitch shot would incorporate more height. The ball would fly higher, land a little bit softer, and roll less distance. I'm using a pitching wedge here to demonstrate the two different shots. Let's start with chipping. When it comes to chipping and the wrists, the real key component here to think about is that ulnar description, the uncocked wrist. If you remember, radial deviation is the cocking or the hinging upwards of the wrists. You'll see there that's 23 degrees of radial deviation. And then if I lower the shaft, you'll see the wrists move into that ulnar condition. We're down there almost maxed out for me in a comfortable position around 30 degrees of ulnar. When you chip, first thing to do is to describe how you'd want to set up with more ulnar than a standard shot. So I'm standing closer to the golf ball, the shaft is a little more upright, the swing's going to be a little straighter, and if you look at the ulnar number as I make these practice swings, it's really not changing too much at all. I'm trying to keep these wrists, this downward cocking of the wrists, as constant as I can. And the way that I feel that when I chip is I imagine my thumbs are pointing down towards the ground, and I draw a line of the swing with my thumbs on the grass or on the ground. I'm drawing this line of the swing, keeping the thumbs pointing down the whole time. That sensation of pointing down helps to manage the radius of my swing, so I'm much more likely to make good contact. And as this is not a powerful shot, a powerful swing, I don't need to create a lot of distance in this shot. It's quite easy to produce. So keep the thumbs down. We'll hit another one of those. That's a really great feel, regardless of what club you're using for chipping. You could do this with a 7-iron if you like to chip with your 7-iron. You could certainly do this even with a lob wedge if you like to chip with a more lofted club. My thumbs are pointing down to the ground. They're still pointing down, keeping that ulnar. So we go from 33 degrees, 33 degrees, 31, 28. That's my feel is that the ulnar, the up and down, isn't changing at all when I hit these chip shots. Now, in reality, it changed a little bit. Went from 26 to 46 to 34. But when you practice, and when I practice this for my chipping, I get the best results when I feel like that ulnar is as stable as possible. And if we wanted to introduce some height to that shot, there's many ways that we could do that. I could certainly start by changing my club, but for the purpose of this exercise and to show you how the wrists work differently for a pitch shot versus a chip shot, we'll keep the club the same. We'll go into our setup, and if I wanted to hit this ball higher, the first thing I'd be doing as I take my backswing is increasing the amount of upward hinging of the wrists, referred to as radial deviation. So I'm not trying to keep this angle constant like I was in chipping. I'm actually trying to hinge my wrists up as I make this first part of my backswing. And a great little checkpoint here for you to look for when your shaft is parallel to the ground in the backswing is that the club face, measured here by the leading edge of the club, this bottom edge here, would be at least vertical to the ground. It would be straight up and down. That would be a slightly open club face, and if you wanted to add a little more twist to the shaft here to get the face pointing slightly up to the sky, that's only going to increase the amount of loft on the club when you hit the ball. So this is a very different shot to the one we just hit. If you remember, we started out last time with about 30 degrees of ulnar. That would look like this. I'm standing slightly further from the ball here and pushing the shaft down, so my ulnar deviation is slightly less, although not much. But by the time my club reaches this halfway back checkpoint, you can see how that ulnar number has moved to 4 degrees of radial. I'm beginning to hinge the wrists upwards. I'm beginning to work these wrists in a very different way to the chip shot. So that would be my practice, trying to add some radial and then hit the ball with that stroke. It's going to be a longer swing, but the ball won't travel much further because the loft on the club is going to help this ball to go higher, not necessarily further. That ball came off much higher. The address position, we had that 27 of ulnar, which again is fairly consistent with my basic setup. But by the time I'd stopped my backswing there, I'd moved all the way to 6 degrees of radial. Adding more hinge helps me to keep this face open for longer. That's also measured there in the extension flexion graph, where the 23 degrees of flexion that I start with is matched, maintained, or even increased very slightly to 27 degrees. That's going to also help me to keep this club face open. So I hope that helps. There's a definite distinction between chipping and pitching, and you can really use your understanding and your basic knowledge of wrist motion to help you hit better chip shots and better pitch shots.